We had heard whispers of the ancient catacombs beneath the city of Limeris, tales of dark rituals and forgotten treasures. The five of us, Lyra the cleric, Thorn the ranger, Kellen the sorcerer, Merrick the rogue, and myself, Bannon the warrior, were drawn by the promise of riches and the thrill of adventure. What we found was something far darker than we could have ever imagined. The entrance to the catacombs was hidden in the ruins of an old temple. As we descended the narrow, winding staircase, the air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding settled over us. Our torches flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls, where ancient, indecipherable runes seemed to writhe and pulse. "Stay close," Lyra warned, her voice steady but tense. Her holy symbol glowed faintly, a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness. We moved cautiously, Thorn scouting ahead, his keen senses alert for any sign of danger. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the drip of water echoing through the corridors. After what felt like hours, we reached a massive stone door, adorned with a grotesque, tentacled face. Kellen stepped forward, tracing the runes with his fingers. "This is ancient magic," he said, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "I can break the seal, but it will take time." We formed a defensive circle around him, weapons at the ready. The air grew colder still, and an unnatural darkness began to seep through the cracks in the door. Kellen chanted softly, his hands glowing with arcane energy. Suddenly, the door shuddered and began to open. A wave of dread washed over us as the door revealed a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At the center of the room stood an altar, and behind it, a tall, gaunt figure shrouded in darkness. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence, and its tentacled mouth writhed in anticipation. "A mind flayer," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to leave. Now." But it was too late. The creature raised its hands, and a psychic scream tore through our minds. I staggered, clutching my head as a blinding pain threatened to split my skull. Thorn loosed an arrow, but it was deflected by an invisible barrier. Merrick threw a dagger, aiming for the creature's heart, but it stopped in midair and clattered to the floor. "Foolish mortals," the mind flayer's voice echoed in our minds. "You cannot hope to defeat me." Kellen summoned a fireball, hurling it towards the creature, but it dissipated into nothingness. The mind flayer extended a hand, and tendrils of dark energy shot forth, ensnaring Kellen. He screamed, his body convulsing as the life was drained from him. Lyra rushed forward, her holy symbol blazing with divine light, but the mind flayer flicked its wrist, sending her crashing into the wall. "Retreat!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear. "We need to regroup." Thorn fired another arrow, this one enchanted with a burst of radiant energy. It struck the mind flayer, causing it to recoil in pain. Merrick seized the moment, darting forward with his twin daggers, but as he closed the distance, the mind flayer's eyes locked onto his. Merrick froze, his daggers inches from the creature's throat. The mind flayer's tentacles wrapped around his head, and with a sickening crunch, it began to feed. Merrick's screams were cut short, and he crumpled to the ground, lifeless. "No!" Lyra cried, tears streaming down her face. She raised her holy symbol, chanting a prayer of banishment. A beam of radiant energy shot towards the mind flayer, but it deflected the attack with ease, advancing on her with a predatory grace. Thorn and I stood side by side, our weapons ready. For Merrick, Thorn muttered, his eyes filled with determination and rage. We charged, but the mind flayer was faster. It unleashed another psychic blast, and I felt my mind tearing at the seams. I dropped to my knees, struggling to stay conscious. Thorn managed to land a blow, his sword slicing into the creature's side. The mind flayer let out a shriek of rage, its tentacles lashing out. They wrapped around Thorn, lifting him off the ground. He fought valiantly, but his strength was no match for the creature's dark power. With a final, desperate gasp, he was silenced. I crawled towards Lyra, who lay unconscious against the wall. The mind flayer loomed over us, its eyes glowing with triumph. "You will all serve me," it hissed, extending its hand. Lyra stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Bannon," she whispered, her voice weak. "I'm sorry." Summoning the last of her strength, she raised her holy symbol and uttered a final prayer. A burst of radiant light filled the chamber, momentarily blinding the mind flayer. I seized the chance, lunging at the creature with my sword. It screamed as the blade pierced its flesh, but it was not enough. It struck back, and I felt its tentacles wrap around my head, the cold, slimy touch invading my mind. As darkness closed in, I saw Lyra, her face serene despite the chaos. Her final act of defiance had given us a chance, but it was a chance we could not take. The mind flayer's voice echoed in my mind, a chilling promise of eternal torment. "Welcome to your new home, mortals. Your souls are mine." And then, there was only darkness.